All right, Rachel. First of all, I love your story. I know your story, so it's going to be weird that I have to now ask you to retell your story. But what I want to start off with is your accidental franchise story. How did you accidentally fall into franchising? Give me the backdrop on who you are and how you got to this place.
Yeah, I mean, franchising wasn't something that when I opened to you that I thought I was going to do. I came into a position where, I had, something not planned for happen to me where my business documents were taken and a competitor started, right down the road. And so I was just kind of thinking, I think as a business owner, you kind of want that control, right? Where you're just like not wanting everybody to have your documents. You built this baby from the ground up. But for me, I was thinking, it kind of turned on a light in my head of like, why not allow other people to have, a franchise, be a franchisee and have that opportunity to open up their own new location. And there's only one of me. And so that was also another component of that is, if I could clone myself at 300 locations, I would. But that's just impossible. And so I think as a CEO of a corporation, you have to realize like I can touch more people and have more impact if I can just get the right owners in here to be able to have a new location. So we can touch more lives and help more people on their journey.
So if anyone were to read reviews on the business, they're going to see a consistency of like transformation, like deep reaction to what you've been able to do to their lives. How are you going to protect that in the way that you're going to evaluate franchisees coming in? How do you make sure that same love and care for their customers is going to exist when you bring someone else in? Like how are you preparing for that?
It's definitely finding the right owners. I mean, we're looking for quality over quantity. And so for me, it's making sure if we get the right owners, we train them and we train them at the heart and the mission of, having that new location. And I think that's the trickle down where you can have a really good owner and they start with potentially one location and then they're following the direction of the ship. They don't want to start their own ship. They just want to follow in the direction that we've created. And then they have multiple units, multiple locations. And so for me, it's making sure that from the get-go that we're getting these right owners. And it's kind of a ground up. We're not out of the 2.1, potentially we'll be looking at acquiring other med spas, but right now we're looking at trying to find people that want to have a de novo, want to start something from the ground up with us and just go in that direction. I think that's really important. Acquiring a med spa out of the 1.0 phase would be a lot harder just for the fact that there's going to be a little bit more cleanup and training of how to potentially run an operation successfully. And so for us, it's looking at making sure that when we're, I always say, at least in my business, I'm slow to hire, quick to fire. Same exact scenario when it comes to a franchisee. When we slow at bringing in these franchisees, because I'm really looking for the person. We could teach everything else, but you can't teach how somebody is going to follow the direction of the ship.
So what I hear out of that is protect the house, protect the culture is going to be essential to who you let in. I would imagine that's part of the magic of how you were able to create a point of differentiation in the marketplace. You and I talked about it, that there are many med spas. So technically your competition is quite wide. But when you look at unit performance, which we're not going to get deep into the financials until the FDD is completely final. But you look at the success of what you've built, success is clearly there in what the performance of the business is. So how did you take this different approach in culture? How did you create a point of differentiation? How did you stand out in a marketplace that did have competition in it?
I think I went about it in a little bit of a different way. I think, I always say there's determination, discipline, and delegation. Those are my 3 Ds that I follow when I crafted the business. But as far as I looked at the business in a different regard, instead of everybody, I feel like on the corner has a med spa. I went a wellness approach. I went a women's health approach. And I feel like if you look at the female in particular, we primarily take care of women. If you look at the female and you treat her on the women's health side, you treat her hormones, you focus on her weight, you focus on her inner beauty, her outer beauty is going to follow second. And so I kind of took it a little bit of a different approach. We're now in the industry, 5 years later now from when I opened, that's now commonplace. When I started 5 years ago, a lot of people weren't utilizing this concept. They were starting more, they have a med spa, but they weren't really thinking on the women's health side or the holistic side or the weight side of things. I've been doing that for several years. And so I was ahead of the game as far as our slogan is where wellness meets beauty. I always focused on the inner beauty, knowing that I could just internally market those patients without having to go out and look for patients and use marketing dollars. I could look internally at my own patient demographic and then target them for our med spa services. It was just very easy to do. So, that's essentially how I differentiated myself quickly, but then I also made sure I had a really good team around me right out of the gate with helping me to be successful between, if I'm not, for example, my accounting team, I'm not a bookkeeper, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, so I'm not going to take that on. I made sure I got the team around me that was going to take that on and help me with the consulting piece and making sure that I'm following the rules. And so, there was things that were not in my wheelhouse, and I made sure I had a really good team around me that would help me to propel me to that next level a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, as an outsider looking at the business, I think the big statement that you just made is you took an inside out approach, and that's level one. We'll get into the business operation in a second. But I think most, if not all med spas take an outside in approach, and maybe they get to in, but they almost focus on everything on the outside. It doesn't solve the core challenges that a female is going through. That's my perception. And so that approach, whether you're a franchise or not, I think helped you create such like stickiness with your customer base and with your staff, because it was a different way of looking at how do you sell a service or product that's going to cost money to a population. So my question is, why do you think even today, I know that you said like you're first to market and their competitors are following, but I don't even think the competition even understands what it means to understand a female from the inside out. I think they still index on outside in. Why do you think that is?
Because it's a transactional relationship. It's an easy answer. I think people are focused on the transaction. I'm focused on relationships, and that's what this business is built on. If you really pay attention to your patients and you really focus on the relationship aspect, everything else is going to be the trickle down effect. They're going to trust you. They're going to respect you. They're going to know that this is way more than a transactional relationship. I'm not out there to get the sell for just today. I'm looking for a lifetime patient. I'm looking for somebody that I want to treat, the sister, the mom, the entire family. That is how I built New You, is one patient referral at a time. That is the best compliment that I can get as a business owner, is that I'm taking care of generations, and that says something. And so I think that that's the big differentiator between me and potentially other businesses that are out there, whether they're in the franchise space or not. We are kind of the first to market when it comes to looking also at a women's health practice that's franchising. That's very unique because that's not been done to date. And so for us, we decided that I can touch way more people. And if I ingrain in these franchisees that focus on the patient, focus on the relationship, if you can build that out of the gate, you will be successful, because they're going to trust you and they're going to tell all their friends and family to come and take care of you. I pay attention to the details. The money is in the details in a lot of regard to that. I pay attention to, what do my patients drink when they come in? Do they want spa water? Do they want bottled water? What music do they want to listen to? We offer them a comfort menu. This is a 4 seasons approach that when they come in, it's very unique from that initial encounter. And patients pay attention to that, because customer service, there is really not a lot of great customer service that's out there. So when you come in and you get pampered, or even for a GYN appointment, you're getting a hand paraffin when you're like getting your pap done. Who the hell does that? And so for us, it's a different approach, but patients know that it's in the details, that they're choosing to spend money to come and see us because they're getting all of these other services that we're really not charging for. I don't charge for a comfort menu. It's part of coming to you. That's the unique experience.
I think you're in a unique position because, one, in franchise brands, I don't think there's a lot of leaders who are actually female that actually lead the businesses. Like, the business is so good that a guy can come in here and say, I'm going to operate this thing, but you being in tune with these like micro details ends up being so important. But I would imagine for you to get to this point of how you approach customer service, it has to be built on your life story, that you were missing these things in your life. You're like, why can't a business give this back in a category that is really, really, really sensitive, right?
Right. I mean, for me, I developed cervical cancer at a very young age. I went through menopause at 32, and I'm going to be 43 here in a few months. And so for me, it was finding this void in healthcare where hormones were not discussed. Nobody would put me on hormones if I found the right clinician who would do that. And so I started looking at, I gained 40 pounds and I was like, my hormones weren't being addressed. I gained 40 pounds. I felt horrible. And then I was aging at a very fast pace. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to look like I'm 90 years old. I'm in my 30s. Like, this is insane. And I really had to find and craft this model that could take care of the whole patient, because this didn't exist when I started NewU. And it was very interesting when I started it, because I was on hormone therapy and I didn't know what would happen. It was very hard to find lending because this hadn't been done before. So going to a bank asking for a loan on something that hadn't been designed before was very, very hard. I got a lot of no's, and I don't care if somebody gives me a no. Somebody's going to give me a yes, because I'm not going to give up until I get my yes. And so I found the right team and I was able to launch this, but it was because I wasn't having this done. And I was done with the cattle approach and healthcare of running women through, like, just on to the next, and not spending time with your patient. And I knew if I followed my own approach and never moved my moral compass, the business would be just fine.
This is an inside out personal question, but do you ever give yourself permission to pinch yourself on how far this has come? Obviously, like you have a whole new chapter that's going to be written in franchising, but do you give permission to pinch yourself on what you've accomplished?
It's super interesting. So actually, it's one of my weaknesses. I feel like there's different price tags on people, right? And I feel like, number one, I don't have a price tag. That's why I didn't sell out to private equity, because if you don't have a price tag, nobody can buy you, right? And so that was one of my biggest things is I don't have to move my moral compass. But when it comes to accomplishing, for example, I passed legislation a few years ago in our state for breast MRI for women, and it took me a few years to get that across the finish line. However, I got the news, I got the call, it was signed into law, and I had a patient to see a few minutes later, right? So I went out to dinner with a few close friends, and I think that I just, when you keep driving forward, sometimes I don't give myself that moment of, well, that was pretty cool what you just accomplished. But I feel like my time on this earth, because I've had cancer twice, I know is limited. It's just everybody's number is going to be called at a different point. And so I have work to do. I have a legacy to build and a legacy to leave behind when my time is up. But I can guarantee you one thing is I'm not going to stop, and I have my faith and I have courage and I have a lot of determination and grit to me that I'm not going to stop until I finally feel that my work on this earth is done. And whenever that might be, I'm going to keep pushing hard.
I'm glad you gave that answer, because when we've pooled franchisees after they've made a decision to buy, we say, well, what pushed you over the edge? There's a primary and a secondary. And primary is culture, and secondary is the business model. And on the culture side, it's believing that the person or the team that you're investing your life savings into is going to truly have your back. And what we just heard from your answer, like when you're talking about legacy, when you're talking about being grateful for the shortness of life, then the decisions that you make are with a North Star that comes with that moral compass, which means above franchising, which technically in many situations could be seen as dirty businesses. We're establishing to a buyer, like you're buying from Rachel. Like you're not, yes, NewU exists. Yes, there's going to be a business model, but you're buying because Rachel's North Star has built it to this point, and she's ready to share what she's built with you. And I think that's
100%.
awesome.
I think the other component of that is, long-term franchising is it's its own entity, its own business. It's the biggest beast that I'll ever have. And I've accepted that. But that is also part of that strategy of I do not want to be an operator as much as I want to be an owner. And I think that is the biggest thing that needs to differentiate myself is that, I have been seeing patients. I can see that aspect of it, but my long-term approach is to be focused on these franchisees and building this out and focusing more on being the owner, less of the operator. And that is why we've systematized this business since we opened, knowing that if people have the playbook, if people know what they're doing, if we have an incredible manual that also can guide them beautifully, then they're going to be able to execute very nicely. Yeah. And a lot of med spas haven't done that. They haven't systematized. It's the Wild West out there. If you go to social media, it's like, holy cow, what's the latest trend? And so for me, it's all on SOPs and operations. And I don't take credit for that. That is not, I call it the Swiss cheese approach we do in our business. If it gets to me, well, the buck stops with me. Now it's come to me now that we have to address it. But there should be so many systems and policies and procedures in place that I'm the final solution. If there's a problem that's now come down to me, well, then I'm going to be fixing it. But if there's all these other layers in the business and you systematize it, then there should be few and far between that I'm catching, right? And so I have a team that does that for me because, like I said, I love to delegate. I don't like to do things that I just don't have a passion for. I don't have a passion for SOPs. Somebody else in my business does.
Well, I think the magic of what you just said, though, is you've operationalized the med spa. We've obviously hit on the emotional side, but the operational side of the med spa means now when a franchisee buys in, there are playbooks and structures on what they can follow. And I think the industry an SOP is built around like a product that you're buying from a manufacturer that can solve hair removal or Botox or whatever. And so most in the industry have leaned into, we bought this tool and that's the SOP. And you said, no, let's build a process underneath it. It's the inside out approach where, again, and to oversimplify, I don't think forget about med spa. I don't think a lot of businesses even approach it that way. I think your approach is tremendous. And on that front, like, I think that's going to be the magic on the franchise side. And if that's the governor even of how you qualify franchisees, every franchisor qualifies outside in, meaning how much cash do you have and how fast are you going to grow? And I think if you go the reverse, which a lot of people don't do, is let's look at your grit and hustle. Let's look at your moral compass. Let's look at what your dreams and aspirations are and see if we can even align to this. And all that's going to be currency for the right people in here. And so it's going to almost change the profile of who can come in with the inside out approach.
It's very interesting. So we haven't really done any marketing. I mean, we're just out of the gate, right? So we have 2 potential franchisees that just know who I am. One, I've never met her before, but we've had conversations now that she's reached out for an inquiry, but she's made it very clear. She's like, I just want to be part of this brand. This brand is so incredible. I don't want my own ship. I want to follow and just keep recreating this. They're serial business owners. They know the business side, but once again, it's falling back. I'm looking for the person. And as long as you get the right people, and that's the same thing as when we hire our team here. Like, when we have open positions, like I'll put people on the bench as far as like, we're always hiring. I'm benching a lot of people and I might move them up to the major leagues at some point to join us on our team. But out of the gate, we're always looking for top talent. I'm never going to fill a position here with a warm body. I refuse to do so because it's all about culture at the end of the day. One bad egg can destroy it for any business. And so those people come and go very quickly in our business. And so even at the reception level, people don't realize a receptionist can make or break your business. Who's answering the phone before they even get to the back with us? And so it's really making sure, I think, that you recruit top talent from the franchisee all the way through to, the reception level.
With all these great, like, everything you've talked about is tremendous from a foundational standpoint. What's the dream? Where does this go? Like, where do you want it to go?
I have really, really big dreams as far as a 5-year plan. I only look at life in 5-year increments because otherwise it's just too cloudy for me. I'm a visionary. I like to look ahead. I believe the universe will move how it needs to move based on how I'm thinking, what I'm putting out there. So I definitely believe in those things. Once again, I really think it falls back on getting the right franchisees and seeing what can come of it. I know that some of the biggest competitors in the med spa space, and I think that our approach is unique and different. But when I look at a 5-year plan of how many locations I want to have, I've had dreams about how many locations I want to have and potentially, or franchisees we want to have and how many locations I guess they will have. But 300 was that 5-year number that I wanted, as far as I had a dream about it. And, it's one of those things. Will that happen? Maybe yes or no. Some people might say you're effing crazy, that there's no way. I'm fine with that. But you know what? I'm not going to just chase a number. I'm chasing a person. And I think that is the biggest thing that this falls back on. And whatever that falls in 5 years, I know I've done it the right way. And like I said, in business for 5 years, I just don't move my moral compass. As long as I can go to sleep at night and I have my integrity, I know I've ran this business ethically and morally sound, then we're going to get the right people.
I think, and again, if you can hold on to what you've done before franchising, like things that we've talked about, hire slow, fire fast, protect inside out, protect the culture, don't let toxic get into the system, like all of these things that you've built a tremendous business up here. If you can hold on to those in franchising, like whether it's 300 or it's 3, like the reality is you do that same model here, like you're going to build tremendous success because you're going to get people in who listen to you because you are the expert and say, how can I, like the candidate that came in and said, I just want to be a part of this club. You're going to build something that is super, super, super valuable. And so anyway, I'm very excited about where that will go. On that same front, talk about dream. What keeps you up at night right now?
Well, there's a few things that keep me up at night, but staffing is one thing that always keeps me up at night. I internally am different potentially from a lot of people that want the control over their staff. I am all about personal staff growth. And so what keeps me up at night is we will meet with all of our team by the end of the year. And for us, it's really looking at like, where do you want to go? I want people to travel from all over the country because my nurse injector is here, not because Rachel's here to inject you. It's trying to build them out. And so for me, staffing is one of those things that I always think about. I always think about culture and I try to know my staff's love language, what makes them feel fulfilled, and making sure we're doing those little things. And, as we get, we have this growth and we're in a lot bigger space right now. We're way more separated from each other, but I always fall back on making sure that, my staff is taken care of, that their needs are met, that their growth is met, that we're hiring the right people, looking for top talent. So that's kind of what wakes me up in the middle of the night, and if I get these wild ideas in the middle of the night, and I'll just like jot them down or, just to kind of remind myself in the morning. But, that's kind of one of those things that I think always kind of keeps you up, is making sure that your team is taken care of.
Well, it's not a secret in business, but when you take care of your team, they take care of your client. And when they take care of your client spends more money. And so like that's just good business. And yes, it starts with like taking care of people, but it's almost like good gets good. And so I love that. Like that is a truth. That's another great foundation. And again, like, not to sound like a broken record, but I think the work that you've put in to build up a foundation that came from the challenges and the fuel that you had to create from your life story have now positioned this, that if I'm a franchise buyer, yes, I'm going to look at what it costs to get in. Yes, I'm going to look at how much I can potentially make, but I'm also going to look at the depth of the founder, and will this founder absolutely have my back in the structure? And clearly you've showcased that on our discussion. What I want to close at is just final words. If there is a candidate that is watching this right now, what do you want them to know about New You?
I think the biggest thing is, like you said, like where wellness meets beauty, we are looking for the right franchisee that's looking for just taking care of the entire patient. I think a lot of people are tired of the medical community. They're tired of that runaround of how they're treating patients. And so from us, whether it's a business perspective or from a profitability of where they can go, to just looking at that bridge of caring for patients and knowing that the profit's going to follow if you just do the right thing. So for us, it's, we have an inquiry form on our New Wellness Clinic website where they can actually go in there and put their information in and put some of their financials in. But also kind of, we have questions and they're like, why do you want to be part of New You? And helping us kind of, go through that process with them, and then bringing them in for these private conversations to see, is this really the right person that's a good fit for us? And if it's not, then that's not somebody that we're willing to wager on. It's just too important. And so I think that, if it's somebody who, wants to be part of something really, really special, that wants to make a big difference wherever they may be at, this is absolutely the right choice. This isn't a watered down med spa. This is very much a caring for the whole patient, looking at a premier Four Seasons approach with, a relationship at stake.
I'm going to add one other element because I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm trying to create a visual for anybody that might be watching this. From an outside, you can see there's a lot of great things happening. You can listen to a conversation like this. It's almost like you look at a resort in Mexico and you're like, it's pretty. It looks like it's on the beach, but the pictures just don't do it justice. And you walk in and you're like, holy cow, I'm really at a retreat. Like, I'm going to de-stress. That's the feeling that you get when you walk into the building that you built and the culture that you built, and you can see it and you can feel just the good juju that's in there. And so to someone that's looking at the space, I think getting to see your unit is going to be essential to them being able to see comparable apples to apples if they're looking at another business, just how special and meticulous you've been on the details to build something awesome. So, Rachel, I'm grateful that you gave me some of your time and told some of your story. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
For Rachel, I'm Nick. This was another episode of Meet the Franchise. Take care.